all hot Papercraft.
Welcome to Blender Basics for Paper Models. So, this tutorial is basically about learning some basics so you can get started on creating paper models. It's on a need-to-know basis. So you may not learn a lot of all the other cool functions that Blender has. For that, you probably want to go to another tutorial. So largely I'm going to concentrate on things that are actually useful for paper modeling and things that I have found out while trying to learn it myself. So we just start right away. Of course, you would first need to download Blender from the blender.org website and install it. And the current version, which we have, is the version 4.02, and we can just get right into it. So when you open the program, you will come to this. You will get the splash screen. And the splash screen is generally very self-explanatory. You can open a new file, you can create a new file here, or you can open files that you have been using before. You can donate, can also be rather important because you need to make sure that the software stays free. You can recover last session if it crashed before. You can open a file, or yeah, what's new. And so normally you would either open an existing file. Like for example here, I have this is one of the files I've been recently using, which is the setup 3 view. Or you can if you come back to the splash screen, so you can get a new file. And what you need to be aware of is that what happens is that whenever you open a new file, whenever you open anything, whether it's a new file or an old file, where you create a new one or open a new file, what happens is that the old file will be replaced. So if I, for example, if I move now this cube, so I make some changes here, and I'm going to make a new file, then it's going to ask me, do I want to save or not save? This is because it always replaces the previous one. So if you want to work on several files separately, what you need to do is you need to open another instance of Blender. So you just open Blender a second time. And then you can switch between the windows. So it takes time until it opens. So in this case, you don't have to save. So open a new one. And just remember that if you want to have an additional window, you need to open Blender another time. Good. So then we have but you need to remember you shouldn't open too many windows, because of course each window is drawing a memory. So if you open too many windows, it can get troublesome, or it will be much easier to crash or to freeze. So that's why you should close windows if you don't need them anymore. Okay, let's first talk about some first settings. So for this, you go to the preferences, which are in the window file. Edit and preferences. And here you have many preferences. And what you definitely need is you should go to interface. And in interface, you can select the language. This can be rather important. So if you are in another language, well, of course, this tutorial is in English, but if you're in another language, if you prefer to have another language, then you can switch here to, like, for example, you can go to simplified Chinese, and then everything is in Chinese. Or you can go to Deutsch, und dann ist alles auf Deutsch. Or you can just leave it at English. Normally at startup, the system the Blender will use their system language. Good. And then another thing that you may want to think about is under input, you have the enable 3 button, emulate 3 button mouse. So this is a bit difficult to show you. It depends on whether you have a 3 button mouse. So actually I'm using a 2 button mouse. No, I have a 3 button mouse, but I'm still emulating a 3 button mouse. Because, yeah, it depends on which button you use. You will see that later when we get into adjusting the view, because you will use this, you will need to the 3 button. If you have a 3 button mouse, then you will use usually the scroll wheel as the middle button, as a left, right, and middle button. And the middle button is to rotate the view. And actually, depending on what mouse you have, it may not be so comfortable. And for the mouse I'm currently using, I don't like it, so that's why I'm using the emulate 3 button view. Good. Then the next thing that you have, I think other things here are continuous grab. These are all settings which can affect how you. I think it's not necessary to change any of them unless you feel uncomfortable. And then another thing that you definitely should be doing right away is to use to activate some add-ons. So the add-ons which you are definitely going to need are the bool tool, and is under object. So here under object, bool tool. So, and this is has all the details about it. So as you can see here on my Blender, it's already activated. If you come into it, it will not be activated, so you need to activate it. And another thing that you of course should activate is here an import export, and you should so import export is that's rather a lot here, as you can see. So in import export you should select export to paper model, because that's what you're going to need definitely when you want to export the model. So those are some basic settings. Another thing that you can change in here is how Blender looks like. So here you have themes. So in themes you can change all kinds of things. Yeah, you can change how everything looks like. And if you are too lazy, so actually the presets which you're going to get is Blender Dark. So it's like this dark. Not everyone likes to work with this kind of dark environment. I personally actually like the brighter one. So here you can switch it to lighter, or maybe if you're familiar with Maya, then you can switch it to look more like Maya. You can also make it like white, yeah, or you can make it printer friendly. I think it depends on if you are if you are drawing something that is in white, you could probably switch to the dark background. If you are using something that is dark, you could probably switch to the bright background. Another thing that you might want to think about adjusting, but that you need to find your own style in the end. But another thing that could be very useful is, like, we are getting to this in time, but you have something called the nodes, or the nodes or the vertices, and those are the points in space. You will have points in space which are called vertices. The singular is vertex, and the plural is vertices. So you have vertices which are points, so you only get them in edit mode. And here you can see those little orange dots here, right? So if I click away, they are black. And if I want to select them separately, they will turn orange. But depending on the screen, I mean, you're watching this video in YouTube, so you probably will not even be able to see this little dot. Yeah, so that's why it can be a good idea to actually adjust the size of these vertices. You can do that here under themes, and then under 3D viewport, and you can scroll all the way down, and then it is here. You can also make the edges wider. You see, you can make the edge wider, so you can see them more clearly. Make no mistake, they will look wide. They will look wider, but this will not affect. They will still be flat. Yeah. So, and another thing that you can change is the vertex size, and I think to increase the vertex size, especially if you end up working a lot with the vertices, may be a good idea. Good. So this is that. Then we get to the main menu. And the main menu is, of course, the menu here where you have the Blender logo, you have File, Edit, Render, Window, and Help. So in the File menu, well, if you are used to other software, you probably can understand very easily how the File menu works. You just use New, and normally you will use General to have any 3D object. You can open recent. Save, I think this is all things which you would be familiar with. Something that is worth mentioning here is the external layer, which is where you can pack the resources. That means if you have images, if you have any external files, you can put them into the Blender file. We're going to mention that along the way again. And of course, another important thing is export, where you export to paper model later. And import can also, if you want to bring in some 3D stuff, you can do it through here, but it's not something that you're really going to need for paper models, because most 3D models which you can get like from the 3D warehouse or something, they are much too sophisticated. They cannot be turned into paper models at all. So unless you want to bring in some model to change them so that they can be used as a paper model, you are not going to need the import function. And also I try to bring in the files from an older version of SketchUp, and they could not be used. It was they were so messed up. They could be displayed, but they were so messed up, and all the surfaces were divided to separate parts. So it would have been actually easier to rebuild the whole model in Blender than to correct it. Good. Then the next thing that you have to look at is the edit menu. And here, again, this is familiar, right? Undo, you should know what undo is. Undo history is here, it will show what you have done. Yeah, so I switch to object mode. Maybe I move this a little bit, and it will show. Well, actually, I'm not quite sure how does it work. You can always go backwards with undo. And then repeat last is like, you know, do the same thing another time. Renaming the items is something we'll get to. This is another window actually. And what is important here is, of course, you have the preferences here. And what is super important here, this is like one function which you're constantly going to use. So you better remember this. Is adjust last operation, which can be, you can also get it with F9. And yeah, okay, now adjust last operation usually appears here in the bottom left side of the screen. And this always refers to anything that you do. So anything that you do, like if I move this, and then it will appear, and I will see, okay, I moved this by so much. I moved this by so much in this direction. So this means like, this is how you can get definitive settings. For example, if you want to rotate, you can rotate it by exactly 90 degrees. So this is something you're constantly going to be using. Okay, then you have different environments. And actually then you have other pull downs here in the main menu, which is render. Render is not really useful for paper modeling because it's only about, you know, like rendering out something, whereas we are just going to export. The only thing that we are getting out is by exporting, and we don't render anything out. And then the other thing is that here the windows, you can have many different windows. You can adjust your windows because actually you can put everything where you want. You see here there's always any part of this interface can be exchanged, but we'll also get to that. And then help, I think, should be obvious what this is. Okay, then you have different environments. You have different tabs. So as you can see here, layout, modeling, sculpting, UV editing, texture paint, shading, animation, rendering, composition, geometry nodes, scripting, and you can even add more. And there are only a few which are important to us, which are layout, which is, I don't really understand what's the difference between layout and modeling, because if you're in 3D, layout and modeling is pretty much the same. Sculpting is not something that we're going to need. Sculpting is where you use where you can manipulate a shape, like simulating an actual sculpturing, like you're cutting something from stone, which is a fun thing to do, but you cannot make a paper model out of anything that comes out of this. Then another thing that we need, which we are going to need, is UV editing, which is of course to unfold, to look at the surfaces, to define the surfaces, and this is for adding textures, or for adding text and to create this 2D pattern. And then we have texture paint, of course, which we need to add the painting, to add the artwork on the surfaces. And this is of course one of the advantages of Blender, because in Blender, unlike at least older versions of SketchUp, you can export out the textures. Whereas in older versions of SketchUp, you can only export out the vectors of you can only export out the surfaces. And then shading is somewhat related to texture paint. We are going to look at this as well later. Once we're talking about texture paint, but it's not super important. All the other things here are not things that we're going to need. But most of the work you will be doing in a layout or modeling view. So then you have the main window. So the main window has various areas of windows. So you have, and as you can see, each of these sections, they have a small icon here in the corner. So here is like this, it looks like this, and here's like this. Here it looks like this, and here it looks like this. So you have different parts, and you can actually through the window settings here, you can rearrange them if you like. But actually it's easier to get used to this, because my tutorial is going to use this, and so this is what you're going to be used to. But of course, if you have a bigger screen, you can rearrange things. And the great thing is about that, if you want to change something, you can do this here. You can just switch this to be the timeline. And you could switch this to be the 3D viewport. Well, how much sense that makes, you can figure out yourself. But this is something that is, highly what you call it, highly customizable in Blender. Good. But actually we don't really need this, because we can just use the tabs. If we go to UV editing, if we go to texture paints, then those will change the environment for us. As you can see here, there are more windows here. Right? You have another window here, and you have another window here. Good. And then, of course, something which is really important to us is this, where you switch between the modes. So mostly we will be using the object mode and the edit mode. And for texture paint, we can also do this via the tabs in the top. So then the viewport editor. The 3D is what we call the 3D viewport. You see here is called the 3D viewport. So the 3D viewport is actually our most important space. And what we need to understand here is what we have. So you have the top bar, which here you will choose the 3D viewport. Here you will choose the mode. And here you have the 3D viewport menus. So view, select, add, and object. And so we will explore them along the way once we get there. So this is of course to make any changes on the view. This is to select things. This is to bring in things. You see, like bring in objects. And then this is something where you can do other things to the objects, just as putting them together and actually mirroring them, those kind of things, copying them. But actually you can also, most of them you can also get to the right mouse click. Also, another thing about mouse click in general. So actually, there's a traditionally the select in Blender is right click, and left click is something else. But yeah, most people are not used to it, so you can switch that. If you're confused because it's set to left click, you can of course go to the preferences, and you go to, let me see, there is a here input, and okay, I don't even know where this setting is, but I think that the preset should be now, by now is actually left click, because that's what most people are used to. Good. So we have these several ones, and then you have something like this. Yeah, and those are things which control how you edit things. We will get to that later. You have the tools, which may change. So in the object mode, there are different tools than in the edit mode. You will see that once we get there. And then you have here in the corner, you have these things, and these things are very useful. And especially the right ones are what's important. So this one is actually affects what can be edited. Yeah, but a lot of those things you're not even using them. So this means like it can be edited or it can't. It can be seen or it can't. Then here, this one is about the gizmos, what we call it gizmos. And the gizmos are something that I highly recommend you to use. And I think it's better not to touch something here. Then you have here, this one is about overlays. And this means what can be seen and what cannot be seen. Again, this is not something where you need to go into. You can also get rid of the floor. So if you have the floor, you see that now the grid disappears. You can hide the axis. This is only about how does it look like. And then those things here, those are important. So this is polygon mode. So in polygon mode, you only see the polygons. You don't see any surfaces. Then you have this, what would usually be your preset and your mode of choice is called shading. No, it's called what is it called? Oh yeah, shading. So shading, it means you can see the surfaces. And then here is another thing. Oh, so shade, no, this one is, oh, so this is solid mode, right? Solid mode. And then you have here, this one is called shading mode. And this will be actually affected by the light. You can see here that the light on this side is different than on that side. Again, this is something that we don't need for paper modeling because we are not rendering out. You see, this one is actually the camera. Here's the camera and this is a light source. So those two will affect this shading. So if I move, or if I would move around this light, see now the shadow is on this side. If I would move this light around, no, okay, it doesn't really work. But if I move this light around, it will change what the shadows are doing. And then you have another mode which is rendered, and again, this is not something that we're going to need. So as you can see here the shadows are even more clear because the light source is here. The light is on this side of the cube, and there is no light on the back. So what I can do is I can move the cube. So you see how the light on the cube changes. Do you see that? Or I move it up. So the light is on that side, right? So again, we don't need this. But something that is rather useful is the X-ray mode, because the X-ray mode is something in between the polygon and the solid mode. So you can actually see through things. My advice is to use the X-ray mode sparingly because, of course, it's more challenging for the graphics card. So just switch it on and off as needed. and not constantly run it. Yeah, so. Okay. Then under here, you have something called options here, and you don't need to touch those. This thing is important. So this thing is your orientation. This is what helps you oriented one. This is actually what we call a gizmo. This is also a gizmo. And here in this gizmo, you see the current orientation of your view. You can see this. So you can see the z-axis, you can see the x-axis, and you can see the y-axis, which is of course length, width, and height, if you want, depending on what direction you're going, of course. Depending on what direction you're looking. So remember that in space there is no up and down. So technically, usually the z-axis will be up and down, and y and x will be left and right, forward and backward. But depending on what direction you're looking at, this is going to change. So it's better to forget this whole notion about up and down and to rather think of them in space. Okay, so and as you can see, you have green for y, red for x, and blue for z. And actually those are also, you can also see the green and red axes here, right? So you could also switch on the z-axis, so then you have a blue one as well. I don't know why by default the z-axis is not shown. I kind of already got used to it. Good. So as you can see, this gizmo rotates with your view. This is very helpful because sometimes you may not know in which direction you're looking, and then you can see what position you are in. And another thing that's useful about this is that you can use this to manipulate the positions. Let me just quickly make this a little bit wider. So this a little bit wider and a little bit shorter. So there will be a difference. Good. So now this is how we can see the cube. I can rotate around it or orbit. This is actually called orbit. So I can, but you know, here I can you can see that this one is like perspective. It means that you have 3D, you see a 3D view, but it also gets smaller to the back. It's smaller in the back, right? It gets smaller in the back. So, but I can also, if I have a plan, if I have a 3D view or something, then I may want to use the top view. But if I rotate this to top view, it will actually still be perspective. Yes, you can see it will still be perspective. This is what I have the orthographic views for. And the orthographic views, I can get them also through here. Yeah, through the view window. But actually, the easier way to get them is through here, by just clicking on the position. So Z will switch to Z. And you can see here it says top orthographic view. Okay, so that's the top orthographic view. And this is the top view. This is the side view. This is the other side view. And of course, minus Z will be the opposite top view. Good. And if you click along it, you can rotate through them. You see that? You can rotate through them. Okay. Then the next thing you have to look at are these things. This is, of course, zoom in and out the view. This is move around the view. And this is change the camera view. It's not like any of those things which you are really going to need. Oh, and another thing. So here, this 10 centimeters, if you go to the orthographic view, this 10 centimeters means what? It means that if you have, it means the size of the grid. So here you have 10 centimeters. So one big square is 10 centimeters. If you zoom in, then the big square will be centimeters. If you zoom in even more, then the big square will be millimeters. This is to help you understand what scale you're operating at. It's not really something you're going to need constantly, especially if you're working off 3 views, but it's something good to know about. Good. Then another thing that we need to talk about is scale. So if you're making a model, usually you might want it to be in some kind of scale. Like for aircraft, plastic models usually have 1:72 scale, or you have 1:32 scale. For figure models, you may have 1:8 or 1:10, and for architecture models, you have something like around 1:180 or 1:200, 1:300. And how do you make sure that this is in the scale? So actually, what you do in Blender for your models, the easiest thing to do it is to actually create the model in original size. So that means if you have a plane which is like 20 meters wide or 20 meters wingspan, and then you just set it up at 20 meters wingspan, you don't consider scale at all, because at the end, when you go to export as a paper model, you can actually then set the scale. So this is why you need this to be in 1:1 scale. But how do you make 1:1 scale? There's some specialty. So if you switch to the orthographic view, like now it says 10 centimeters, but actually the units in Blender are exchangeable. They are flexible. They are not fixed to centimeters. They can be one. Actually, it's one Blender unit, and this one Blender unit you can define it in different ways. So you can go to any window, and you will need to switch this. And you should find this one, properties. And then you have you get the properties. This one will be exchanged to the properties. Of course, later you may want to switch back to the outliner. So here in the outliner, you can actually see the object, right? You have the definition of the object, and you have the scale X, Y, Z, and you can see that there is no unit here. And location here is currently in meters. And then you have in here you have a window which is the scene, which is this drop and a circle and another dot, whatever that's supposed to be. So this is the scene. Those are the scene properties, and it is, of course, and the scene is always what you're currently working on, because if you have an animation, you can have different scenes. Again, we are just working with one scene, but we need to be aware that what we are currently working on is one scene. So this, and here in the scene settings, you set things such as, for example, if you have an animation, it will create the software will automatically create gravity for you to help animate. Of course, you don't, for paper model, it does not make any difference if you have gravity or not. If you're not going to have audio, okay, you don't need any of those things. Okay, so, and then here you can see that you have a section called units, and the unit system is set to metric. So you can also have none, which would be the Blender unit. Or you can set it to metric, which I think is the default, or you can set it to imperial. In this case, your sizes and everything will become in inches and foot. Good. Yeah, and then you can have the unit scale. You don't need to deal with any of those things. You can just switch the unit to Peter. Actually, you also have temperature. I'm not sure how this is going to work. They don't even have Celsius here. I don't know. I don't know how this virtual temperature is going. Good. Then you want to switch to the outliner. So the outliner is something which is very useful. So you can switch this back to the outliner. And the outliner means what? The outliner is a basically a list of everything that is in your document. And as you can see here, there's another. So this I switched the outliner here, and here is another setting I can switch. I can have different parts, which are data and stuff that is included in the file and the view and layers, but we don't really work with layers in for what we're going to do. But what we need is so we have the layers here, but actually the layers are a little bit funny because it's a 3D space and you don't have layers like that. I don't really understand what order the things appear here, but as you can see, we have three objects here. One is the camera, which is this. One is the light, which is this. And one is the cube, which is this. So if I add another object here, like say a cylinder, then another object will appear here. And so I can keep track of all my objects. And here they have some sub-selections because some objects have different instances. That's not really something that's super important. But something that you might want to turn on before you start, or that will come in handy later, is you go to the filter here. So this is the filter, and here you can select this selection arrow, selectable, yeah. And then another icon appears here, and so this means that you can adjust the elements. So this one, the eye icon, is actually to show and hide. So you can show and hide everything. You can show and hide the camera, show and hide the cube, show and hide the cylinder, show and hide the light. And this one is for selecting. So now currently I can select them. I can select all of them. But if I don't want this cylinder to be selected anymore, I can close this. And now this cannot be selected anymore. At least supposedly. Oh, okay, because I chose the wrong one, so I should have the cube, which is of course not a cube anymore. So you see now this cannot be selected anymore. And this is very useful if you finalize things and you don't want to accidentally move them around. And if they are in a way, you can just turn them on and off. So this is very useful. Okay, another thing is to change the view. And in a view, for the view, you have different ways to manipulate your view. And I already mentioned the 3-button mouse. So if you have a 3-button mouse, you can use the middle button to orbit. For that, well, it's again difficult to show you in this video, but I will push the middle button, or I will. If I have a 3-button mouse, I can push the middle button. Or if I have a simulated 3-button mouse, I will hold Alt on the keyboard and click the left mouse button and hold. And then I move the mouse around and I can orbit around the current view. This is something that you have to try. Good. Then another thing that you can do is you can pan. It's this kind of movement, left and right. So this kind of pan movement, you hold the left mouse button, the Alt key and Shift, and you move left and right. You can also move up and down. So this would be pan. For zoom, it's very easy. You just if you have a scroll wheel on your mouse, then you can use that to move in and out. And if you don't have a mouse, you can also use plus and minus. It's either plus and minus on your numpad, or you can plus and minus control with plus and minus on your keyboard. Yeah, but if you don't have a scroll mouse wheel, think about getting a mouse with scroll wheel, because for this kind of it's a huge difference whether you have to constantly zoom in and zoom out with a keyboard or whether you can do it with a mouse. Okay, then you also have if you have a numpad, you can also use the buttons there to bring up the different views, like 7, 9, 8, 7, 9, 1, and 3 to bring up the orthographic views. Yeah, I can't show it to you because my computer doesn't have numpads. And another thing that's very useful is on the numpad you have a dot, you have a period on the numpad, and this period on the numpad is also super useful because it can let you zoom into the object which you selected and then orbit around that. So as you can see now, this is orbiting around the box, but I want to orbit around the cylinder. This is painful. So I can just select this, and then I can orbit around it. So if I don't have a numpad, then what to do? Then I can go here to View, and I can go to Align View, and here is the setting called View Lock to Active. So that way I can zoom in on this, orbit around this, and whatever. And I can also go back from it. So this is actually what you toggle it with the numpad period button. You can just release it again, and then the view will goes back to what it was before. This is a super useful function. And another useful thing is in my written tutorial, it's not mentioned at this point, but another useful thing is the local view, because the local view will, so you can use the slash on a numpad for it, or you can use the menu like this. So the local view will, what the local view will do is it will hide all the other objects except the one or the ones that you have selected. And it will actually also automatically switch to the center, which I just showed. So toggle local view back. Good. So this is the first part. So the next thing we are going to have to talk about is the 3D cursor. And the 3D cursor is your key to success. Yeah, if you look at tutorials online, it's always very difficult to grasp what is this 3D cursor. What's the point of the 3D cursor? So this 3D cursor, remember that you are in space. There's no up and down, no left and right, no nowhere. Yeah, you have the coordinate system, and you actually have a central position here, yeah, from where things are measured. But you have no fixed, you don't really know where is where. Yeah, if you have boxes of different sizes. This could be a cylinder which is big but far away. Or it could be a cylinder which is small and close. You never know, right? So the cursor is your only fixed point in space. And what makes the cursor so powerful is that it affects how you edit things. So as you can see here, you have a setting. You can change this setting was actually, again, we're getting to this, but this is how transforming will be affected. So as you can see, the default here was median point or bounding box center, and a bounding box center is usually what you see if you select something. You will see a little dot in the center. You can see this is here on here. Maybe you should check it on yourself, but you always have a little dot in the center, and this is the median point. What is this? Oh, no, bounding box center, sorry. The bounding box center. So the bounding box center is what? This is the bounding box center is what is the position from which is the point in space from which the position of your object will be measured in relation to the origin, and the origin is of course where the three axes meet. Good. So normally, so this is a preset for scaling. So if I, for example, if I scale this, then it will be scaled toward this point. Okay, maybe it's a bit confusing now because the cursor is at the same point. So here I select this. No, I don't want the cursor here. So I select this box and I can scale it. No, I can scale it up and down, bigger and smaller. And you see this is now centered towards this centered point. Sometimes the centered point is not in the center. It can change. Yeah, but in other things, like maybe you want to adjust based on the corner, right? So then what you would do is you would use the cursor. So you position the cursor here, and you switch the view to the cursor. And then that way, if you scale, it will be scaled to and from the cursor. See that? Another thing, if you are rotating, if you want to rotate, you have bounding box center. You see you want to rotate, and you select this object. No. Let me keep the cursor here. You want to rotate this object. You select the object, and you go to rotate, and you rotate. You see, let me see. You rotate along the green axis. So what you can see is that what happens is it rotates again around this center. But you don't want to rotate around the center. You want to rotate around the corner. So you put the 3D cursor in the corner, and then you can rotate around the 3D cursor. Another thing is that if you rotate, you will notice that the 3D cursor has an orientation. This can also be useful supposedly, but it's rather difficult to because if you set the cursor, if you move the cursor by clicking somewhere with the cursor tool, then the cursor will always be aligned to the current view. So you can see this, and now this is aligned. Now it's perpendicular. But if I start to move it around, you will see that the orientation of the cursor changes. The axis because the cursor itself has also its own axis. So this may affect things. So you better be aware of that. So you better embrace the 3D cursor, because I will constantly be talking about repositioning it. Good. So how about basic selection? Basic selection is like this. You have the selection tool, but you have different selection tools actually. And in Blender, it's like how you select things. Actually, in any other 3D software, as far as I know, it's very crucial how you select things. Yeah, if you have more simple softwares, you don't really need to worry about selection. Maybe you select several things at the same time by using Shift, or you can draw up a frame to select something. In Blender, especially when you get to the edit mode, it's super crucial to know how to select things. So that's why if you go to the select menu, you have quite a lot of different options to select things, and you have 4 different ways to select. So the tweak will be just like a regular select arrow. So you can click on something and you can choose that. And notice here, these choices here in the top. So with these you can actually adjust your selections, and the important ones are these. Yeah, and extend existing selection, so you can add something to it. You can add something. You can select several things. Well, actually, I don't know why it doesn't work. Okay, but anyway, so, and then another thing is like you can subtract. Actually, you don't need to worry about this too much. You can use Shift. You can hold Shift. So if you hold Shift, and then you can select several objects, and you can also deselect them. So once you get into the edit mode, it will be more sophisticated. Then you have another option of selecting, which is the select box, which is you can just draw a box. Actually, why is it called blocks? I don't really know. But for this one, you would draw a box around objects. And here you see the setting was changed to subtract. So you need to have the new selection. So if you're not able to select something, it's usually because you have the wrong setting here. So you draw the box around it, and you can see that everything within the box has been selected. Another option which is the select circle, which can help you. Anything that you touch with the circle should be added to the selection, or should be selected. I don't know why it's not selecting the box, actually. I don't really understand. Okay, then you have another one, which is the lasso, where you can just draw a random shape. So this are things which you have in other softwares. Again, in the object view, you don't really need anything except the tweak one. Good. Once we get to the edit mode, once you get to the edit mode, we will need to talk more about selecting. Okay, and then, but technically, this one should start a new selection. This one should let you be able to add more objects to the selection. I don't know. It doesn't really seem to work here, and yeah, okay. And then the other one can let you remove objects from the selection. You need to try it yourself. Good. Let's talk a moment about the adjust last operation. So the adjust, I already showed it to you. You have adjust last operation. And adjust last operation usually appears in the bottom in the window if you change anything. So if you move this away, then it appears and you can see how, okay, this has been moved by 2.3. So I can set this to 3. So this is the key of adjust operation is, adjust last operation is that you can make exact inputs, which you cannot do with a mouse. Why you cannot make these settings while you create things, I don't really know, but it's just don't ask questions. Just be happy that you can adjust it later. Good. So again, you can get the adjust last operation from here, and if you open it once, it will usually appear in the bottom. Either it's closed or it's open, but it will usually appear here in the bottom. And then you can switch it. Okay, and this is also something which you will constantly need to adjust objects to the right size. Like when you bring in, especially if you want to work to scale, then you're going to need this. And another thing that you're going to need is here is hidden here. Okay, but we will get to that. So those are really the basic ones, and so those is just your first getting to know the basic things in Blender. And next we are going to work a little bit with the object mode, how to use the various tools in the object mode. Thank you for watching.